Welcome, everyone, to StabilityHub's Everything You Need to Know About Stability CMOs, sponsored by Q1 Scientific, division of Cambrex, with sites in Belgium, Ireland, and the US, providing expert stability storage for your critical medical product samples. You can visit them at q1scientific.com. We would ask that you turn your camera on if possible, but stay muted unless you are asked to comment further on a question. Please use the Zoom chat feature to submit your questions or comments at any time during the event. If desired, you can address your question to a specific panel member. In the absence of your questions, we've assembled an interesting array of frequently asked stability CDMO questions. This session is being recorded and will be available in the articles and videos section at stabilityhub.com. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panel speakers, or in some cases would-be panel speakers if they're just a little late getting in. Change the slide. So possibly Susan Cleary, Director of Product Development at Novatech International, can be addressing some of our things about CDMOs that deal with data. The Edwards, Ken and Monica, might stop by for Precision Storage Division of Astorium for those kind of things about facility registrations that we'll talk about a little bit later on. Aideen Glenn, Quality Manager at Q1 Scientific, our sponsor for today. Patrick Kelleher, Associate Director of Physical Sciences, Freethink Technologies. Yours truly, John O'Neill, a lifelong stabilitarian, PSDG facilitator and editor at StabilityHub. Walter Routh, founder and CEO of Sagana Quality Consulting, ex-AbbVie Stability Director and Associate Editor at StabilityHub. We'll get started with today's presentation. Questions are welcome via the chat feature throughout the session, but please match your questions to the appropriate segments of the slides. So, Stability CMO may be on your path forward. You're focused on protocols, samples, everything else, stability, including disaster planning, analysis, and reports. Each one is gobbling up your resources and your time. When things are going great, that's a great place to be. CDMOs provide the specialized equipment, storage capacity, and scientific and regulatory expertise that many drug developers lack in-house. If you're a big organization, you might have some of these folks. If you're a small startup, you might not have any. Stability CDMO may be your path forward in some or all of these categories that you're focused on. So wanted to emphasize that even though you may not be thinking about a CDMO today, one can very quickly enter the picture depending on your circumstances. Things go very fast or go very slow, or your plant gets wiped out by a tornado. A CDMO is a good person to know, or a good entity to have in mind. Here's a little projection for the 2020s that we picked up. Pharmaceutical stability and storage services market by size from 2020 to 2030. You can see that 2024 was the time when they took this, and I was wondering when I looked at the slide without my glasses on, what $1.98 was in 2024, but it's 1.9 billion dollars being spent in those categories. And you can see that it only increases as it goes up in both categories. Storage continually gets a little bit bigger, as well as the testing does. US CFR 200.10 says this, that FDA views extramural, referring to that doesn't state it exactly like this, but the FDA views extramural contract facilities as an extension of the manufacturer's own operations. So if you contract them, they are yours, and you are then responsible for anything they do, on the good side or the bad side. The manufacturer retains ultimate responsibility for the facility's methods, results, and their use. The FDA may disclose information from contract facility inspections that pertains to the manufacturer's product compliance with the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, and the accepting of the contract work is considered authorization for such disclosure, meaning that anything they do can be made public. You might want to have kept confidential. If it comes out in an FDA inspection, then it comes out from you as well as them. Results from analytical method validation studies and control procedures are not considered trade secrets. that a contracted facility can withhold from the manufacturer. So anything they do, you need to know about as well. No trade secrets on the CDMO side. And this from the article that we had in our recent monthly newsletter was by Ken and Monica Edwards, and was very timely in that I matched up with our CDMO concentration this month. And they wanted to emphasize understanding FDA registration and FEI number requirements for contract storage facilities. And then depending on the definition you have of your CDMO and what the FDA defines, you may or may not be concerned about this, but it's great to be aware of it and to look into a little bit further. So Ken's article explores the circumstances under which a stability storage facility may require an FDA establishment identifier number, or the FEI, and highlights its importance for regulatory compliance, submission of the required documentation, and successful navigation of inspections. And when considering a CDMO, whether for storage or other stability-related functions, it's incumbent on the client to know the applicable regulations, which might be this one, maybe not, but might be, whether regional, national, or international, that impact the CDMO's ability to legally transact business with clients that have to comply with GMP requirements. So what it's embedded in that particular paragraph is that it may not be an FDA required. It might be something on the European or Asian side or South American to look into their requirements and see if they require anything similar to this. And then there's a link there that you can go to this particular article and read the full amount of that. But whether or not you're using a CDMO and you're thinking about one, you need to take this into account. Does that facility need to be registered? Is it fully complying with all the regulations that are in its particular geographic area, or that you'll be responsible for because you're dealing with them in a different area? CDMOs are partners in compliance, and they become not only a business associate, but a partner in the regulatory aspect of things. Now, excellence in quality and output is the goal of successful ones. The client always bears the responsibility for all the data and outcomes achieved through the CDMO. And a 483 that goes to that CDMO has the potential to halt production or sales of the client's product. I've seen this happen recently, and just in the last year or so. Major corporations, including one that I used to work for, were relying on a CDMO to start up production. It wasn't particularly in the stability realm just yet, but it was in production. And they had to stop because that particular CDMO had some major problems that they needed to resolve before they could proceed with their clients. So you become their partner. In fact, if you can get to their plant and assist them in doing any kind of audits and bringing anything to mind, whether it's your concern or a regular GMP concern, you want to work with them and make sure that these kind of things don't occur. When the client doesn't perform the correction, they should avoid falling victim to the CDMO deficiencies through that diligence beforehand, just as I mentioned. Work with them. If you see something, say something, and by all means, try to help them through it. And that'll make it easier for you and them as they proceed. This sets up a series of best practices to achieve the required outcome and may include ongoing quality audits and reviews to catch any emerging difficulties. I remind people, if you have any questions as we go, you're welcome to ask them in real time by way of the chat feature. Just keeping an eye on our time. I think we're right on the mark. CDMOs by the numbers. Number one, establish stability client user requirements. What is it that you need from them? What are your quality standards that you'll expect them to have as well? What's your budget? What can you afford to do? And what will you need next? So not only what you're thinking about today, but you don't want to start them on a project and then suddenly load them down with 2 or 3 more projects that you knew about, but they did not. I'll tell a story about that. I was working for a company that was utilizing a CDMO at a good clip. And then almost overnight, as a result of an FDA inspection, they decided to dump the entire rest of the program over on the CDMO unannounced. The CDMO, not wanting to lose the business, took it on. I'm not sure how they they managed to accept all that and catch up on it. But had they known, they could have planned their resources and everything else along those lines. I'm not even sure the company I work for knew that they would be doing that till the last moment. But the point is that you want to look ahead when you're making your arrangements, what's down the road, and let them know about that because they may need to start gearing up, or they might decline your project because they won't be able to handle what's coming. What are your timeline requirements, and are there flexibilities in that? And some CDMOs will prioritize people that pay up front, whereas others that are kind of in the waiting room might have to watch for just openings in the schedule where they can be fit in. So make sure you make all those arrangements ahead of time. Number two, awareness of the candidate CDMOs and their services. So search the internet, check StabilityHub suppliers, phone a friend, find out any way you can who is out there, who's reliable, who has made their clients very happy, and possibly who is not. Speak to their representatives of the company. Confirm their appropriate regulatory registration status, as we mentioned earlier, and then mutually assess goodness of fit with regard to number one above, that they can actually handle things and move forward. Word of caution regarding the CDMO marketing versus capacity. When speaking with the sales representative of a CDMO, you should also speak with a scheduler or a manager of resources to be sure that the CDMO's capacity will keep pace with the fruit of an inspired sales force. Go back here. Somebody has an open microphone that we're catching some background noise on. So when you do that, make sure that the capacity matches up. Salespeople are very enthused and they get rewarded by having sales. And I've heard of some cases, and you'll see that I think in the next article series that I'm going to bring up, that sometimes the sales and marketing people can outpace the capacity that they're representing. There's a great article, The Key to Outsourcing is Timing Lines, Not Timelines, by Louis Gargilo, Chief Editor of Outsourced Pharma. And he gives a unique bilateral view of the client-CDMO paradigm. And his article is about a scientist who has worked both sides of the contracts. And I think this is anything you see in the way of outsourced pharma. And this particular editor has been fantastic. There's a wealth of information. It's kind of like a mini StabilityHub, only dedicated to outsourcing. So heartily recommend that you take a look at that. Some key quotes from that article. We might better think more about timing lines rather than timelines when it comes to working with external partners. So timing when you want to do things rather than how long it will take overall. Ensure you base your projections on realistic timing lines of the components needed to complete the task and projects. Focus on communications and stay empathetic to the position your partner is in. So if they have emergencies and things like that, what's your priority there? Will they take you first, or will you be pushed back down the ladder just a little bit? Keep communications flowing. And then you can see a link there to get to that particular article. Number three, the quality audit. When everything clicks around user requirements, goodness of fit, and CDMO quality and capacity, a quality audit by the client is arranged. Quality audit with your QA auditing team should include your in-house stability subject matter expert to spot potential stability-specific issues. And I don't know how many times in the past I've seen auditing teams go out to places that we were considering for stability storage or testing, and we didn't get invited. So they would often skip over some things that were very important to us, but didn't violate any quality things. So in their book, it was fine. Quality agreement, following up on the audit, crucial. Legally binding, a document that's between the sponsor and the CDMO, and sometimes these are cited in the guidelines as well. It defines each party's roles, responsibility, and quality expectations for ensuring CGMP compliance and the product quality over the entire life cycle. Details responsibilities right down to the details of shipping, storage, testing, deviations, recalls, and audits. And serves as a roadmap to avoid conflicts and meet regulatory requirements. So good to have this quality agreement in great detail. And we'll show you a couple more instruments that go even to finer detail. The FDA guidance for industry for contract manufacturing arrangements for drugs, quality, and agreements is noted in that link there. That's a worthy read as well, but we won't take time to look at it right now. The standard of work, or SOW, and the way of working, WOW, agreements. They define project specifics, roles, tasks, timelines, and deliverables, acting as a crucial roadmap for success. And it clarifies and gives expectations, and that's going to reduce disputes and problems. When it comes to the SOW, that's more specific towards formal detailed document outlining project scope, objectives, tasks, deliverables, timelines, cost, and acceptance criteria. So really into the nitty-gritty here. Key components include the project introduction, objectives, detailed scope, and in and out, the work breakdown, and deliverables. Ensures the shared understanding as well. And there's a question came up. Can a SOW replace a quality agreement? I'm thinking it may. I'm not sure why you would want to, but if you did, you would have to have in there all the things that cover the quality agreement as well. So if you have a SOW that's so detailed that includes all the quality agreement materials, I think you can do that and make sure that you mention that you carefully examine both, and that was your intent with the standard way of working. Because you wouldn't want to have an inspector come in and catch you off guard and say, no, you don't have a quality agreement, and you don't have anything in writing that shows why you actually have it covered in your SOW. The way of working reduces ambiguity, helps onboard new members, prevents gaps, overlaps in work. This is more the human element and some of the processes that you do and roles and communications with your team. So just goes a little bit above and beyond the standard of working and tells a little bit about how it's going to be working. Let's see. I'm reading some comments here. Walter's comment, call me lazy, but what I'm hearing a significant hindrance to going with the CDMO is that you're basically building a whole new set of procedures to work with them and ensure they're working properly with you. Any comments on that monumental task? So a good point. And I think we have in the presentation coming that we really want to reach out and trust a CDMO partner that's already done all of the legwork and the groundwork before with dozens of other people. And we might not have such a huge task to do. I'd like to stop and pause for a moment because now we've had like the most people that are going to join with us. So it's a good time for a brief word about StabilityHub. And I'll take that opportunity to invite those who are new to visit our website, stabilityhub.com. Check out our featured publications, regulations, events, suppliers, our interactive forum, job opportunities, and more. And while you're there, sign up for the drop-down form for our monthly newsletter to see what's new. And those of you already receiving that knew that there was an article with the same title that preceded us by about 2 weeks. And then also brought up some other features that wrap themselves around the CDMO theme. As a part of the Pharmaceutical Stability Discussion Group, or PSD for short, StabilityHub is planning to return to live PSDG meetings May 17 through 19, 2026 in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, where attenders can spend parts of 3 days asking questions, sharing information, touring facilities, meeting vendors, getting acquainted with their services, and networking to gain lifelong professional contacts and friends. We're looking for companies in the US that would like to host future meetings at their facilities after this one. If you would like to learn more about attending or hosting such a meeting, send an email to stabilityhub.com/contact. And now we'll get back to the presentation and start with the next slide here. We're up to number 6, access to data. Determine when the client can get access to data as it progresses from instrument to document to review to possible investigation and to approval and release. And many will want to access data early as it was generated in their own shop. Such interventions can cause delays, inaccuracies, and disputes. So have an agreement as to when you get to see the data and which data you'll get to see. And that brings us to the review of raw data. Most agreements will involve a modest amount of raw data review as part of periodic audits. It's not unheard of that the FDA inspectors have expected far more than what we traditionally do, including a 100% review by the client. That is not the norm, but it has been raised before and caused all kinds of consternation with the company that I'm familiar with. The rationale and justification for the amount of raw data review should be well documented at the start of a CDMO relationship. So we need to get that established up front if it's going to be whenever you do an audit. That seems to be one of the norms. Or if you say you're going to look at 10% of the data over time, that could be another one. Just work it out and put it in writing so that you can defend your decision if questioned about it. CDMOs by the number 8, establishing a relationship. A good one incorporates the elements of knowledge, trust, transparency, communication, and promptness. So if you can make those happen, it's not all on the CDMO to do that. It's up to you to open up the information flow and get it started. They're well established with how they deal with other people. So you either need to meet that standard or exceed it if you can. You don't want to be an anchor dragging them along when you have great expectations from them and they can't get these kind of things from you as well. Establish a client stability relationship. Number 2, some key steps in achieving a good one include full stability client participation in the generation of documents and agreements, establishment of lines of communications, timelines, and access to data. Notice that was the stability client. That's not necessarily people just above you in management. That's you as well, if you have hands-on in the stability program. Establishment of the pricing is something to take into consideration, having regular meetings and communications between the appropriate principal staff and management of both organizations, keeping the chain of communications simultaneous rather than serial. You don't want to be looking at passing information up and down ladders all the time. That's appropriate in some instances, but from day-to-day things, somebody in the bench of one organization and their supervisor should be talking to somebody at the bench and their supervisor in the other. It doesn't necessarily mean that the corporate president has to look at every single thing you do. Some helpful client relationship advice instead of dictating, and this is from that article that I cited earlier, some good quotes from that. Instead of dictating, we should ask ourselves, have we thought enough about what the CDMO is suggesting? Could we try it that way rather than how to try and get them to change everything they do and slow things down? Small changes in attitude build mutual sponsor-provider commitment. So how you go about negotiating with them is important. Along with attitude, communication of realistic demands is vital. I've learned to over-communicate, but with empathy, our author says. I acknowledge the pressure we are putting on our CDMOs, and I try to frame my questions in a way that shows respect for their expertise. If you had to highlight one thing in this entire presentation, it probably would be that statement. The data and equipment matter. The relationship can matter more. Sponsors who treat CDMOs with empathy, respect, and curiosity get better results. And then through successes, trials, and tribulations, the strongest sentiment should be that outsourcing is ultimately about humans dealing with humans. Some categories that we want to take a look as we progress through here. We'll be looking specifically at stability storage, sample testing, ISO conversion, product characterization programs, data analysis and reports, and regulatory remediation. There are more than that, but those are the ones we chose for this particular presentation. We have some panelists to represent some of these. I'll be talking about all of them, regardless of whether or not we have panelists. And this is a good time to ask some specific questions around these people as well. Looking at the chat, by auditing the CDMO for fitness, stability, key performance indicators that the CDMO monitors can be asked for, which includes pull dates, test by, C of A turnaround, investigation turnaround, etc., should give an understanding. Good points. Thank you for that. So stability storage, and we have Aideen Glynn from Q1 Scientific to look at some of these questions and make some comments on that. And I think we are well on time here, 12:25, slide 25. Yeah, we have plenty of time. So Aideen, would you like to address some of these questions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. And hi, everybody. I think first off, you hit the nail on the head when you said that outsourcing is the success or failure of outsourcing comes down to the human-human interaction. So the main thing for us would be communication right from the start. So if you're looking to outsource your stability storage and you're looking to come to us, for example, the first thing you need to say to us is the conditions that you're looking for. How many batches are involved? How many samples are in each batch? How long you're looking for to store, because we need to make sure that there is a disaster contingency plan. So for every condition that goes down, that your samples are set down on, there needs to be a method for disaster planning. So we will always prefer open and honest communication. And if there's any queries or if people aren't sure, if they're looking at marketed conditions, they can come to us and we have a round table and we sit down and we discuss what are the best conditions for these samples, what are your accelerated conditions, how long is the set down, and is there any special handling requirements? So we need to know, or CDMOs in general would need to know if the products are hazardous, for example, if special PPE is required, special training. Is there going to be a regulatory impact? So if there's if it's an active substance or if it's a controlled drug, then there's licensing issues that we need to plan for in advance. Um, this is all this information shared up front will avoid any unnecessary delays and it'll ensure that regulatory requirements are met from day one. So there's no surprises to anybody. So do you anticipate overflow or backup storage during peak periods? So this goes beyond logistics and comes down to risk management and continuity and contingency planning. Um, if there's any surge capacity, we need to plan so we can prevent any last minute scrambling, any panics that people have. Can you share your game plan as a number of batches, the samples, the conditions, and the timing? So we can have samples stored from 1 month to 60 months, depending on the marketed conditions, the position, the state of the product, whether it's in submission, whether it's an annual commercial batch. And we need to know whether it's going to be on how many different conditions, and we need to plan for this in advance. Um, the foundation of a strong storage partnership is a clear, proactive plan. So we need to have all this information laid out at the very beginning, if possible. Now, things change, and I understand that, but this comes back to the open and honest communication between the CDMO and the client, because ultimately the regulatory responsibility comes down to the client. One thing that's often forgotten is the transport of the samples to and from the storage facility. So this is often the weakest link in a chain of custody. So you need to clearly define the responsibility for transport at the beginning. This comes back to the strength of your QTA. So within that QTA, I would recommend that you state whose responsibility the transport of the samples are, whether the client is going to transfer them to or from the facility, or whether it's the CDMO providing the storage. Will they be temperature controlled? Will there be a chain of custody maintained? This is all really important, and it ensures full traceability from collection to arrival and ensures samples remain compliant, not just during storage, but also during the transport. We also need to make sure that some products need different levels of storage. So, for example, if you're storing an aerosol, for example, you might want it horizontal, you might want it vertical. These things need to be discussed at the very beginning because that'll come down to transport as well. We need to make sure that they're being stored to represent the conditions in which they're going to be stored at, I guess, in real life. You know, if somebody's going to fire an inhaler into the back of their cupboard, or if they're going to hold it up straight. So we need to be able to monitor real life conditions as well. And we'll say this to our clients so they're aware of all the issues surrounding the stability.
Thank you, Aideen. We got a comment about definitely noticed our CDMOs constantly make shipping errors. This is a comment in general, not a specific towards any one. Pack out specs and even DOT and IATA Transportation Act compliance And I'll say another word of caution in there as well is that it's good to set up with the CDMO exactly as Aideen mentioned what kind of shipping processes you're going to have. One company I worked for had an agreement with another site. It wasn't even a CDMO, but that site set up transportation needs with a contractor, and the contractor subcontracted, which was not in any agreements, but we didn't specifically prohibit it. That was my company's mistake. And as a result, the subcontractor took some materials that were supposed to come from Ireland over to the UK and then make the jump over to California. And someplace between Ireland and the UK, we went out of specs just over 30 degrees C, and that was one thing. But then in London, the subcontractor picked it up and had a better idea than flying all the way to California. They thought it would save some money if they landed in beautiful Las Vegas in the summertime and transfer the materials out of the hold of the airplane and into the back of an 18-wheeler tractor trailer transport and run the product through the desert without air conditioning in the middle of a summertime. So that was well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think we recorded internal temperatures within the truck at 80 degrees centigrade. So none of that was in the agreement or expected. So that's where we really need to spell out no subcontracting, and everything has to remain according to conditions, things along those lines. Okay, Aideen, do you have an example of when things have gone bad and what it takes to pull it back on track with sample sending and that kind of thing? Is there a way that you take care of those sort of things? I know you're in charge of quality there, so maybe you have an example of what goes out and comes back again through the efforts of teamwork.
Well, it's funny, something you said earlier on kind of resonated with me about pallets of material arriving on site unannounced. Um, so we had a situation where say a certain amount of samples were agreed, and then we got 3 to 4 more than we expected. So we had all the chambers set up for the condition and the quantity, I guess, of the samples that we were expecting, and then extra came. So it's how we can react to that and how quickly we can turn around. And that comes back to our contingency planning. So we'd have a backup for every storage facility that we provide. So, but it's the communication with the client. I suppose they need to be made understood at the beginning, the importance of being open, being honest, and understanding that the impact that they have on the storage CDMO as well as on themselves.
Well said. Thank you. Let's go on to the next CDMO area. And that's sample testing. We don't have a panelist directly on this one, although several others can speak up if they want to. This would involve method development, analytical testing, microbiological testing. Can the client quickly map out the requirements for their project? So that's the client side. What updates for formulation, packaging, handling, and testing are planned, or as we mentioned before, anticipated, so that you're not surprising people jump by jump on the CDMO side because you knew about this, but you failed to mention it to them. Maybe you're trying to guard your plans, but some are very worthy of sharing ahead of time. Can the client ensure proper scoping of the project to limiting factors that can stretch timelines and exceed budgets? So taking full account of where your project is going and not changing it like the example I mentioned overnight where you dump an entire project on somebody that's not prepared for it. Can the client identify ways to mitigate risk and determine how to complete deliverables to the CDMO within a target timeline? What is it that's going to happen on your side that could slow things down? Can the client develop a scientist-to-scientist approach to eliminate the communication barriers and delays inherent in traditional channels? As I mentioned before, not going up and down the chain every single time, only when necessary. If you're going to make some kind of a decision that requires management, that's fine. If you're just talking to somebody and say, hey, I got this data point here, it's unusual. Can you tell me what goes on with that? And then if you need to, you can elevate that up the channels, but just the day-to-day communication shouldn't be delayed by by things sitting in people's email and not getting read for days at a time if somebody's away traveling. ISO conversion, another type of CDMO, product characterization programs very specifically. And we have Patrick Kelleher on scene here. You can maybe speak to the unique kind of things the CDMO that's involved with this expects from their clients. Patrick, you
Sure.
want to?
And before I get specifically at the accelerated stability side of things, I can chime in briefly on the stability testing as so far as the analytical method development piece.
Mhm.
So we've been involved both on the side of where we are developing methods for our clients, and we've also, for specific methods, have ourselves gone and hired other labs if it's outside of our capabilities. So I think in that particular piece, it's very important to be clear up front about the requirements. What phase of development are you in? How good a method do you need at this point in time? What's phase appropriate? Does it need full validation? I think we had an example not too long ago where we were working with a client. We developed a method for them, and one of the key pieces of information was that their manufacturer does not have UPLC. They only have HPLC. So if we had developed them a fantastic UPLC method, that would have been useless for them. So it was important to clarify up front what are the constraints, and then we have to work within those constraints. So um, and that definitely carries over to the ISO conversion is a way of doing this, but generally accelerated predictive stability. Um, I think as Adine spoke to before, communication is key. The more information we have up front, the better we can help our clients. So um, we've had our best experiences when our clients treat us as partners and are completely transparent with where they're at and where they're trying to go. And that way we can often offer suggestions on how we can better help them and guide them. Um, I think in all this, there's probably a very big distinction between GMP and non-GMP that I think has been kind of alluded to, John. I forget if this comes up at any point in your slide deck specifically.
GMP versus GLP. No, we didn't address
Versus non-GMP.
Not specifically. We just wanted to make sure if there were GMP requirements that they were met. But that's a good point. There's a lot of things that don't need to be GMP in the early stages, and you can avoid some expense and some time delays if you convey that you're just looking for quick and dirty at any particular time before you get to the GMP requirements.
Yep. And most of the work we do is non-GMP, and which, yeah, means that you don't have to do an audit. You might not need the quality agreement. There's a lot is tied to GMP versus non-GMP. But non-GMP is accepted in a lot of, again, what phase of development are you in? If you're in phase one, then it doesn't need to be GMP. You can do a lot of this work without all that barrier, and it becomes much easier to outsource and work with a CDMO if you don't have all that. But if you need it, it's good to establish that communication very early and say this is going to go into a phase two or phase three filing, an IND, whatever. It needs to be GMP. Let's get that let's get that audit scheduled as soon as possible, get the QA folks talking to one another, and really get all the paperwork in place so you can get to the science.
Mhm. Great, thank you. We did have a question pop up here. It goes back a little bit to the shipment. Do most clients ship stability samples under controlled conditions, or is it dependent on shipping lanes and expected conditions at that time of year? The answer is yes. But to be more specific, it's a great precaution to take to do some controlled conditions. Set up where they can't go beyond this or that. Maybe not exactly controlled to the temperature recommendation, but within a range might be possible. If you ship consistently in the same place, same time, and you got data to show that it stays within, then possibly you might ease up a little bit on the amount of money you're spending to control those conditions. In any case, you always want to monitor so that if it does go out, you'll know what happened. And that can be done very inexpensively with some modest equipment, temp tails, that kind of thing. But you can get very technical with some of the latest things where you can get real-time transmissions right from the container that you shipped on let's say an ocean-going vessel. You could know at any given moment what that temperature is. Another one has the industry considered the adoption of a templated stability plan to enable consistent Let's see, hold it. New one's coming in, shifted mine right out of view. Consistent, streamlined communication of key stability information needed for a given study or studies. Templated stability plan. I'm not aware of having seen one, but that's a great idea. Some companies have such templates, but wondering why industry is not unified on adopting such a template. You might want to be the founder of a committee that gets together to do that, maybe inviting some people. And
John, I think you muted yourself.
how many minutes has that been going on? You hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Templates are great as long as they remember to turn them on before shipping. Yes, I've seen that happen. Okay, let's keep on moving here. And I not only muted myself, I took away my ability to move slides. Let's see, here we go. Stability Data Analysis and Reports, CDMO. I'm not sure if we have Susan Cleary online. She wasn't sure if she was making it, but I'll just mention that statistical analysis packages such as registrations, applications, regulatory reports, those kind of things are important that we might need some outside help on. What are the questions and makings of good data analysis and reports for a CDMO partner? A lot has to do with how well your data is. Have you followed all the data integrity inputs? Can you do an audit trail through your data? It's the data you're going to hand somebody else to analyze for you in good shape. Can the client supply ICH Q1E compliant data to the CDMO? And can the client organization complete corresponding in-house validation of a purchased data analysis program? So while you have some things that the CDMO does, if you're going to do some analysis, you also need to do in-house validation to make sure that what you're getting is okay. Can the client apply CDMO LIMS database to data analysis or supply a compatible system database for the purpose? In other words, do you have to cross lines in order to get this data done? Are you going to mix it up with more and more transfers from one LIMS to another and possibly to an outside package to do that? Chris Latos, I see you are on screen and I didn't prepare you ahead of time for this, but have you ever been involved in this kind of a data transfer kind of thing in your experience?
I haven't because we haven't worked with any CDMOs, so no.
Okay, so you're an interested watcher on this, not a good commentator in this regard.
Yep.
Uh, Yeah, we do have several small suppliers of software that do data analysis, quite well known within the industry. And then there's some larger suppliers of LIMS that have their own analysis built in, but sometimes it just shoots back and forth. So the key part in this category is to make sure that all the data is top-notch and traceable, that you don't have any weaknesses in your system when it comes to supplying the data. For statistical analysis packages, let's see, this is what I just did. Okay, getting into a summary. Whether immediately needed or not, it's important to know about CDMOs. Where are they? Who are they? What's their record? What can they tell you about themselves? And what can others who utilize them tell you about their experience? We want to research ahead of time to shorten the gap between need and solution. By all means, to make sure that that's as short as possible, because time is money, and every time you get a delay, that also impacts everybody else that's utilizing that CDMO. We want to check to see if your prospective CDMO has or needs a registration, whether that's the FDA one or a European one. Anywhere where that place lies is under some kind of constraints with the region, and you just need to check to make sure that that's all set. Be realistic in your expectations for timelines and output because things shift and change. So you want to have contingencies as well. Consider the wider experience in some CDMOs where it might exceed yours. So you may not need to insist on your exact program going over to them. If they meet GMP requirements, if there are those, maybe not reinventing the wheel inside their organization is a good thing. Always check and see what they've done in their development of their quality system and make sure that's up to snuff with yours, but you don't necessarily have to change their quality system in order to use them. Outsourcing is ultimately about humans dealing with humans. So remember how they might feel or react, the constraints that each one is under. Everybody needs to get things done almost faster than asked. So have patience with people, understand what their constraints are to do that. A few references that's handy to do. There's a neat article by our Aideen Glenn, who's been speaking with you a little bit earlier. There's also one about ICH-Q1 testing. We did a specialized webinar on that a little bit earlier. You can go back to and take a look at. Standard of work and way of working agreements. There was a great article there. If you follow that through, you'll see a lot more details on those. And then the Edwards article, Facilities Understanding FDA Registration and FEI Number Requirements by Ken Edwards. So you can follow that back through as well. And that takes us to things that are left unsaid. What questions, comments, challenges, experiences you might have. And if we run out of time on that, you can always go to stabilityhub.com/discussion and post things there. So other questions. Walter, you had one. Let me make sure that's the most recent one. Some might have popped up. Yes. As partners in compliance, are we, the product owner, obligated to notify our CDMO if we are experiencing a stability compliance issue that might impact our product being stored in their facility? So this sounds like any of our panelists, but particularly Aideen, if it's a storage question. What about them sending you any compliance issues that they might have?
Yes, now that should be laid out as part of the terms of a TA. But if you're having issues, with the stability compliance, then yes, you should notify us. We should be looking at our own product then and seeing if we're having the same issues or see if we can identify something that might have led to your issue, for example. If it's an issue that you're seeing that, say, it's a packaging issue, that something is, it's not sealing properly, then we're putting the what would you say, the personnel of the CDMO at risk potentially. So all information is really important information, and that goes both ways, I have to say. So if we had a problem on our site, say we were noticing a temperature fluctuation, or there was something on the ink on the packaging that was reacting to a high temperature, then we need to inform the client as well. So again, it comes down to really, really good communication and regular meetings between the CDMO and the client.
Okay, and we have an additional comment from Sri in our comment section. Yes, especially in the EU, as in EU QP's release is a norm, and they need to know all issues with the product. So if you have a QP in Europe that's about to release material from the CDMO, they need to know that as well because they're held responsible for those things. Very important aspect to do. I might make mention in the area that we had before about, I think Patrick mentioned it, in method development. I've been part of companies or known of companies that have developed new methods and changed them within the company and totally forgot that some of their projects were out there with CDMOs. And it could go for maybe a year or more before the CDMO catches wind that there's been a method change. And the other, it also applies for specifications. They might be narrowed or changed at all. And somebody in the analytical department is looking inward instead of outward. And sometimes it's the stability folks that notice those changes and are kind of take responsibility for pointing it out for your quality department to notify the CDMO that there's been these changes. So I've seen not only a year go by, but I've also seen two method changes happen before the CDMO actually was informed that that was the case. So I imagine for a quality person at the CDMO, that is probably a nightmare finding that out, that the data you've been generating is older data. So the company would have to come up with some kind of agreement that as of a certain date, you're switching over to the methods and you document that quite well, or perhaps even at a time point within stability protocols where it reaches a certain time point, and that's when the change occurs. I've seen it done both ways, but you're welcome to set that up and make sure you document those kind of things, how it happens, when it happens, who notifies. That can go right back to the quality agreements or the standard of working, that all that gets ironed out. And then to have, especially I think as stabilitarians, we can be the watchdogs to see whenever we see a change happen internally, we need to be the reminders of people in our organization. Did you tell our CDMOs? Comment here. Let's see. We have a large program, our own LIMS system and labs. I'm leery of the possibility of having my data held up at the mercy of a third party. How can I ensure that my data from a CDMO is accessible as immediately as it is for me in the house? So that's a good point. And any of our panelists are welcome to comment on that. I'll start it off by saying that, yeah, that's part of the standard of working where you need to be able to set that up. How long will it take to get data? And sometimes it's the kind of data. So maybe they've noticed something that's been out of specs. It's only a couple hours old within their shop. Maybe their manager or supervisor has not yet even looked at it. So you don't want to panic and be notifying the client that there's a problem until you're sure that there is a problem. By the same token, you don't want to be 3 or 4 days down the road and start impacting timelines before you inform somebody. So it's a fine balance of what steps you'll take in order to ensure that, yeah, that's a valid problem or a valid piece of data, and to do that. In fact, some companies have even made it possible for the client under protected circumstances to go into a database and see some of the data. Not everything and not roaming all around throughout the CDMO's database, but to get to a file that their data goes into, and that could speed things up. Let's see, we're getting some more comments. Note to follow your quality agreement timeline when it comes to how much the data turnaround. So that's great advice. Usually quality agreement calls for a C of A turnaround in 45 days after the pull date. That includes testing, review, and release of time point, and that generally meets up with the standards that we've seen at StabilityHub all along for 30 days for test completion, and then maybe another 15 for review and approval. So great advice there for timing, and probably closer in for notification that you're investigating something. A similar issue we have with not having an OOS-OOT agreement or quality report available from the CDMO on time before the next interval testing started. So that's something you want to look at as well, a great reminder for that. Another comment, the CDMO must follow their SOP. So look at their internal SOPs. That's a good point. If they'll make those available to you, if it's impacting you, they might disclose that, they might not. There might be reasons not to do that. Aideen or anybody on the panel, can you comment about sharing SOPs, the pros and cons of doing that?
Well, just to go back there to having getting data on time, I think it also comes down to control of your suppliers and how you're managing your contractors and vendors. So if you have set all this up at the very beginning and they're not adhering to timelines, well, that's an issue with your CDMO, and you need to start looking at that. If you do an annual review of your CDMOs, that should be flagged as an issue, and potentially maybe looking at another option if this is a consistent issue.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been going on in the text chat, that like this should all be spelled out early in your agreements and is covered by SOPs. And as far as sharing SOPs, in our experience, if we're audited by a company, they read through all of our SOPs. They're able to look at all of that. So yeah, full
Okay.
transparency.
Has
Yeah,
there
I'd agree with that. Sorry, John. We have full transparency as well. We get a lot of client audits and a lot of regulatory audits, but they can only read them on site. We wouldn't be issuing them to a client. We wouldn't be letting them leave the facility. They would be an uncontrolled copy that they're reading, so they're not version controlled. But while they're on site, while they're dealing with us and they're auditing, they can have visibility all right.
Has there ever been a time when going the opposite direction and looking at the client's SOPs is informative as to why they do things the way they do, or maybe about their expectations?
We'd help them with the setting up of protocols. So at the beginning of a study or at the beginning of a relationship, if you like, we'll come in and have a discussion with them. So they'll be very open with us about their procedures, about their timelines, and about their product. And we will help them develop the stability protocol with the testing timelines and the number of batches and the contingency planning. So there has to be a certain level of openness and visibility and consistency as well.
Okay, thank you for that. In our comments section, there's a question: who's responsible for quality agreements, the stability team, audit team, or QA? I'm guessing QA and maybe sometimes regulatory are the primaries, but it's always good to have the stability team have input in there. The audit team to know about the quality agreements and what's being put in that, things that they can look for when they go to do their inspections along those lines. And anybody else want to comment as to who is responsible for their quality agreements? I see there's one that's QA. Anybody else have anything different? We have a comment from Joshua that is probably why the quality agreement is better than a SOW to outline these types of issues, and important to use audit programs to ensure they are following their SOPs and their SOPs are acceptable. So yeah, that's a key point. Don't slack off in your auditing programs. Should be trained auditors. I know most companies have auditing teams that are just stretched beyond the limits. They're always on the road going someplace with another 3 or 4 asks in their pocket as to where they should be next and what they should look at. So we stress them out a lot, but it's great if they're well trained and moving along and know exactly what it is that we've agreed to and what they should be looking for. And that's why an annual audit is a requirement on the basis from Sri, his comments. Walter is appreciating these comments as well. I thank you for that. We're running out of time. We'll get to any last question. Okay, if not, I will go on to here. Looking ahead for StabilityHub, we have a number of things in the fire, irons in the fire, as they say. Medical Product Stability Day 2026 is coming up on February 26th. That's an expanded program, 90 minutes from 11:15 to 12:45 to make sure you can get out of meetings and back into them at the top and bottom of the hours. That's basically like our office hours program, but with a good deal of smiling and laughs and celebrating National Medical Product Stability Day. We'll have some digital floats and a lot of speakers, a lot of panelists. They'll be talking about all kinds of different areas within the stability realm. And you're welcome to bring your questions and stories and anything else along those lines. Method validation and stability testing modernization joint venture. Big mouthful that say that we're going to work with Kennex, a seminar company, for a joint presentation on March 12th at 11 o'clock Eastern. It'll go for an hour and 15 minutes. The PSDG in-person meeting, we return after a 5-year absence, maybe 6 years now, on May 17th through 19th in the Raleigh-Durham area, North Carolina. You can look online at StabilityHub to get some details about that. Within a week, we're going to go live with our automatic registration program where you'll be able just to click a button, see where to send your payment, and then get some more information about how to actually go to the meeting. Good time if you enjoyed the interactions here in our webinars. This is 3 days worth plus touring the host company and interacting and having an activity is in the Monday night arena as well. And then Kennex Laboratory University, another Kennex production is June 23rd to 24th in Philadelphia, PA, where they have a number of speakers, number of stability topics. And I think I'll be making my last Kennex appearance on that date in Philadelphia. It's been a good run with Kennex. Okay, we have to end our time there and say thanks to our panel members. We very much enjoyed your input. And our sponsor, Q1 Scientific, and you visit them at q1scientific.com. So we thank you all for joining us. We're hoping that you can join us again on future meetings. You're very important to the stability community, and we really appreciate your participation. Thank you, Walter. You can turn off.